Support of Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month. Thank you again, Miss Madeleine Black, for joining me here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you are so passionate about going out there and helping others heal, especially from the very traumatic event of sexual assault.
Sure. So my story really starts regarding sexual assault when I was just 13 years old. I went on a night out with a girlfriend, and we both did, I'm sure, what most people have done at some point. We lied about where we were staying, and we managed to buy alcohol. It was the late 1970s, so it was a lot easier then. Somehow, I'm sure I didn't look 18, but I managed to get alcohol. I know in America you have to be 21, but it's just 18 here. And obviously, I've never drunk. I got drunk really, really quickly. We were kicked out of the cafe that we went to, and two of the young guys from our table took us back to my friend's mum's empty flat. And naively, I thought they were going to take me out of the clothes that I'd been sick in, put me into the bed, and let me sleep off the alcohol. But actually, became very clear really early on that they had different ideas, and they both proceeded to rape and torture me for about a 4 to 5 hour period. And then they left, and they threatened me that if I spoke about it, they would find me and they would kill me. And one of them, I thought, actually, I think he was capable of doing that. So I didn't speak about it for about 3 years. But in that time, I know now, what we don't speak about, it's got to come out somehow. And it just had a massive impact on my mind, my well-being. I developed depression and anorexia. I was suicidal. I had fears, phobias, anxieties, and it affected me for many, many years until after lots and lots and lots of healing, many different types of talking therapies, body therapies, alternative therapies, I finally shared my story online. It was the 22nd of September 2014 with a London-based organisation called the Forgiveness Project, because I later on chose to forgive these two men, which some people might find tricky to understand, and it took me completely by surprise as well. But it was never for them. It was about for giving me a better chance, because I was still chained to them, kind of tied to my past, and it held me back being chained to them, and I wanted to be free. We really, I guess it really was an act of self-love and self-compassion to allow it to forgive so that I could let it all go, basically. It was like the final piece of my healing. And I shared my story, and the founder of the organization, Marina, she always calls us story healers rather than storytellers. And I just love that. And, I felt that healing power that comes when we share our stories so many times. Every time I speak, or someone reads my book, or they watch a TEDx, somebody will message me. Most days I get a message from a survivor of sexual violence, sexual abuse, sexual assault. And I know it takes a lot of courage to speak up. And I don't expect everybody to speak publicly like I now do. But I think when we don't speak about things, we hold ourselves back. We carry all of that shame and that guilt and that fit, and that gets heavy. It gets so heavy. And if you can speak about it, it's like unburdening yourself. So, it was somebody else speaking out really that helped me to find my voice, because courage is contagious. I do believe that. And I'm really on a mission, I guess, just to pay that forward, to help other people find their voice, to find their courage, to live their life as best as they can. But I'm also passionate about sharing my story to help end that shame, which never belonged to me or any other victim of any sexual assault or abuse or rape, and to end the stigma and the silence surrounding sexual. Writing my book in my early 50s, that I realized that I had been raped 3 more times. I had no idea about consent in those days, no idea. And there were 3 very clear moments in my life when I very definitely said no, and they just said yes, and they carried on. And interestingly, it's those kind of chapters that people contact me as well. They message me and say, I have never experienced the extreme violence that you did, but the other rapes that you talk about. And it's not about comparison, because it's never really what happens to us. As you know, it's what we do with it. That's what really matters. But they said, well, that really happened to me, and I never really called that rape as well. But yeah, a lot of my fears afterwards were about my safety, being out of control and being around men. And I saw very clearly these fears. I was getting more and more evidence that my fears, I guess, weren't real. A lot of my fears were based on my imagination. So there's a few acronyms that we know: false evidence appearing real, or face everything and rise. And I just thought, I've done the first one for so many years. Like, fear was my pal. We walked side by side, hand in hand for years. It kind of influenced everything I did. And I thought, I need to try the second one. So I didn't realize what I was doing at the time, but I kind of put myself on my own exposure therapy. And I then started to put myself into situations that I would have avoided, that would have really freaked me out and terrified me so much that I would have just stopped. And it really started when I decided to become a mum, because I thought I'd never become a mum. And that was really when I thought, as you said, about my power, that if I didn't become a mum, then they'd won. I was giving all of my power and control over to them, and actually, they wouldn't even have any idea. So it was a bit crazy. So I came up with this plan that I did call my best revenge. I was going to become a mum, and I went on to have three gorgeous girls. And I was also determined that I was just going to live my life as best as I could, and I would do whatever it took to heal and to clean up the trauma that was just in my head. And as you know, it's in our body as well. It's not just our mind. We carry it, which is why we get triggered and why we have flashbacks and memories and body memories and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's not an easy journey, but the thought of living stuck with all of that also wasn't easy as well. So it's a much better alternative to do the work to heal, even though it's not easy. It's not an easy journey to heal, because you have to dive into all those spaces that you wanted to avoid for years and push down and run from and not look at. And actually, the work really is by going into those difficult spaces, those dark chapters. The way in is always going to be the way out. So that's what I realized eventually. It took me a while, but that's what I realized I had to do.
Use the word revenge.
Mm-hmm.
And your best revenge was to have your beautiful daughter. Do you say that the revenge that you took was really a really sweet revenge, if you will, right? Because
Best
your
revenge.
girls, really, at the end of the day, it was like, you have no power over me.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about staying stuck, right? When we
Mm.
hold on to resentment and we hold on to disgust and we hold on to hate, what did that do to you when you were there in that space?
Well, it does nothing to them, but it did everything to me. And as you say, it just held me back. It kept me stuck. And I had these awful fantasies in my head that somebody would kidnap them, take them to an empty place and tie them up, beat them up, rape and torture them for hours on end, like they had done to me. So they would know how awful it was. It's not just one night; it affects you for years. But I think also, even though we say we hold on, there is a natural process to the trauma. You have to allow it to do its job. I couldn't at 13 just make that choice for, oh, I'm just going to forgive them. I'm just going to decide I'm not traumatized, because I was. I was really, really traumatized, and I lived with PTSD for years. I didn't even know it. Now, when I understand PTSD, it all makes so much sense, that I would be very jittery, I would jump at the nearest thing, I was fears and phobias, I had bad, trouble sleeping, eating, all of the things that went with PTSD. But you have to allow the trauma to do its job as well, because the body responds biologically anyway. It was a natural process for me to be in trauma. But once we see what we're doing after getting that support and realizing how we're behaving, because we behaved that way years ago in order to protect us. My mind did numb out because it was protecting me, it was keeping me safe. But when I saw it didn't need to do that anymore, I actually was safe. I had to learn to, as I talked about my fears before, all of them were based on what had happened, and all of them were based on what could happen. But if I was really able to stay in the now, which is not an easy job, but to stay as present and connected and as grounded as possible in that moment, I was okay. I was actually really safe if I'm in the now. Nothing can happen to me in the now. And that's really always been my job, I suppose, is centering myself and keeping myself as steady as possible. That's not to say that I've achieved it, because we do get knocked off and we do get triggered and we do get upset as well. You know, I'm not thriving all the time of my life, but mostly now I can see when I get dysregulated, and I'm able to bring myself back just, you know, much quicker. Before it could take me years or months or days, but now it's moments. I can really like, oh, okay, you're going out there, just come back in, center yourself, breathe, you're okay. This is just a trigger. It's just a bit of residue that's stuck in your body that needed to come up in order to heal. But yeah, you have to work it with someone. I don't think you can do it by yourself. I think you really need the support of other people, the right people. Once you see it, however you get there, then you always have a choice how you respond. And I didn't want to stay stuck, and I didn't want to stay angry for years, because why would I want to live out the rest of my years like that? You know, I'm here on this planet for such a short time. If we think of the existence of this world, billions of years, we're only here for about 10 nanoseconds. So I want to enjoy these 10 nanoseconds. I want to have a good life. So that's really why I chose forgiveness, and I chose not to be stuck anymore, to make the most of my life.
A workshop or seminar that you attended. Remember, I saw that on Instagram, and you did everything that was asked of you until it was time to go up.
Yeah, I've walked on fire, I've walked on broken glass, I can do the arrow, and I've done that before. But you place the tip of the arrow here, and the other end is on a wooden board, and you walk towards the person, and it snaps. Easy, right? And
Right.
then as they were doing it, the arrow turned into the knife against my throat, and I started to shake and cry. And this was only like a few months ago, just in
Yeah.
March. And I thought, what's going on? I'm healed. I'm okay. I speak out about sexual violence. And that took me by surprise, and I was crying, and I thought, I can't do this. And then I just thought, no, this is not the knife. This is the arrow. You're here, wherever I was in York. You're at an empowerment conference, and I just walked forward with my breath and just snapped it. But it really shocked me to show me, actually, there's still a bit in there. Maybe there's even more in there. I don't know. But then I was able to thank my body for showing me that there's just a bit of residue of trauma left behind, and it was just waiting to be cleaned up. And actually, within 5-10 minutes, I was back present, back in my body. And I was able to speak about it in the forum. There was maybe about 200 women, and they said, "Does anybody want to share?" So I said, "Well, I thought I was, I was really okay." And this really, it's just really knocked me for six. I was like, "What? How can that happen?" But yeah, even when we think we've done the work, we still
Yeah.
get shown, oh, there's a little bit in there that you still need to work on. So, but now I'm not affected by it. It was good, because it showed me that's just where the work was. That's just a little bit that was left behind that needed to be cleaned.
If there is anything that you could really encourage and inspire parents and adults, caretakers, what would that inspiration, what would that message be to help us to be more vigilant, to be more aware, so that we can teach our children as well as we move forward, how they can also protect themselves, how to find that safe space if anything were to ever happen to them? What is
It's
that
hard when
message?
I hear you say words like, how can they protect themselves? It's not our job to protect ourselves. It's up to men to stop raping us. So it's very hard, because I don't want to start saying, you shouldn't go here, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't wear that, because then that is victim blaming. Because I know now it wasn't to do with what I wore, it wasn't to do with what I drank, it wasn't to do with lying to my parents. It came down to the fact these two men chose to rape me, and that was it. And it took me a long time to realize that 100% of all rapes are caused by rapists, nothing else. But what I would do, I guess, because I know, like you, I held on to inappropriate shame for years. It was never my shame. The shame always belonged to them, but it's such a intimate crime that we take it on board, and we're not supported by society. Like, we get these messages, well, why did you go to his hotel room, and why were you wearing that? You were obviously asking for it. No, you can wear whatever you like, you can drink whatever you like. It's not an invitation to assault or to rape you. And you couldn't find your voice. So I guess what I would really want to encourage is really healthy conversations about relationships, what's acceptable, what's not, about consent. You know, what does consent mean? Be very, very clear. Has to be very enthusiastic, yes, from both sides, and it's okay to go so far and then change your mind. But also consent from little tiny children, like we force our kids to go and give your uncle a kiss, go sit on your grandpa's lap. Why? Just let them become aware of their own body and make their own choices. Because I think when we listen to our gut, we know if it feels right or if it feels wrong. So trust your instincts and have open, honest conversations from a very, very young age. I've always told my girls, I don't care what they're doing, if they're drunk, if they're stoned, if they're lost, whatever, phone us. We will always come and pick you up with no judgment, because I was always obviously worried about their safety, not just because of what happened to me. I'm also a Jewish mama, so you know it's doubly hard for me to let go of that need to protect them. But actually, they're okay. You know, I don't need to protect them. Um, there's no easy answers, I don't think, but I think having good, healthy relationships, they can ask you anything, they can tell you anything, and being very clear about what's acceptable, I think to me that's the way forward. And that works for boys and girls, not just for girls, you know, to a boy as well, what's acceptable within a relationship, what's healthy.
What would you say to the survivors, the victims of sexual assault that don't have a voice just yet, or have not even started their healing journey because of all of the stigmatism that's out there? Maybe they don't have anyone safe that they can talk to, or don't know what kind of resources that they have. What would you say to them?
Well, like you, I also just minimized what happened to me, even though it was so horrific. I just thought, well, it wasn't that bad, really. You know, it wasn't really that bad. I denied it and numbed out from it, and I pushed it out of my head. So stop denying it. You know, stop telling yourself it wasn't that bad. You know, in your gut, it was what it was. So I would say it's never too late to find your voice. Yes, it's not easy to say those words, but find someone and be clear who you find, somebody that you trust. It doesn't have to be a therapist, it can be a friend, a hairdresser, a neighbor, anyone, but make sure it's somebody that you trust, that you share your story with, because it is important that you're really heard and that space is held for you and they can listen, because it's not just sharing it. You want someone that can listen without judgment, without saying, well, do you think you should have done that, you know? So no judgment there at all. And if you can't find somebody to share your story, then write your story down, you know, tell yourself your story. And eventually your voice will come, because, as I said before, it really weighs us down when we hold on to all that stuff. And speaking out about it, because for years I could feel that it was stuck up here. I couldn't even speak the words. It's so liberating. It changed my life. My first TEDx I did, it was with 2,500 people, and I was the most terrified I'd ever been, but I was the most liberated I had ever been as well, because it's like I've got nowhere to hide anymore. And my second one was called Why I'm Shaming Shame, because shame lies to us, it holds us back, it tells us that nobody will believe us, and all of these things. And it is the shame that prevents us from speaking out, and you have nothing to be ashamed about. It wasn't your fault ever. To shift it, to move it, because it occupies so much space inside of us, whatever our
Yes.
trauma, if anything, it takes up our insides. And
Yeah.
when we can shift it energetically by speaking or writing or drawing or dancing it out, whatever, then there's more space for us to turn up. The
Yeah.
space of us from before it happened, or even more of us to come in that wasn't even present before. So it will really shift your life if you can shift it.
If there's anybody out there that gets it, you get it, and you've been through so much. And I watch you thrive and I'm thinking, my gosh, she's amazing. So thank you
Oh, you know
again.
what? It's likewise. You don't underestimate you. You are pretty spectacular as well, and all that you do to help people. You're fabulous, darling.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts or any final words that you'd like to share with my audience before I end our call?
I think I've already said it before, but I'll say it again. It's not what happens to us in life that is important, but it's what we do with it. That's what really matters.